First off, what a fascinating book. And we've already covered this. We're not going to go over spoilers. So if you haven't bought the book yet, you better. But a fascinating tale. As you tell these stories of the future, I can't help but feel, and as a fan of yours who has read you for as long as that I've had, the future that you describe seems closer and closer. And in this book, it almost feels like we're just on this very thin side of a veil. Your protagonists are living in their car. There's definitely this chaos, but it's very economic. So I'm just wondering, is this? I feel like you just kind of keep calling it.
Well, that particular event, we just recently had one. So that would be the 2008 financial meltdown, when a lot of people did end up with their furniture on the front lawn and living in their cars. And that is an ongoing phenomenon. In fact, a movie just came out called 99 Houses, which I must rush off and see, which is about a man whose job it is to evict people from their houses because they can't pay their mortgage. I just came from London, England. There was a show on the radio as I was going to the airport. It was a call-in show of people whose kids had moved back into their house.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Because they couldn't afford to buy or rent. So people who called in were both the kids who had moved back and the parents who had had the kids move back in. And this just seems to be something that's happening in big cities where the prices keep going up, and in other places where there have been crashes, plant closings, once booming places like Detroit, where everything just kind of went away, and that's now. It's not the future. So Stan and Charmaine started off well. They had a honeymoon. They got a mortgage. They had a house. They both had jobs, and then that thing happened, and their enterprises closed, and they were out of a job. And pretty soon they were out of a house, and then they were living in their car, and that was pretty dangerous. So then they see on television, where Charmaine is working at a CD bar, they see an ad. And the ad is for a plan that you can apply to, and if you're lucky, you can get in. And inside that, you will have full employment, and you will have a toilet that flushes, and you will have clean, fluffy white towels, and you will have floral sheets. That is very, very appealing, especially to Charmaine.
But it kind of does come with a little bit of a catch.
There's several catches. There's several catches, but you can see how you would go for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, very appealing. So the full employment is because it's a timeshare. And the timeshare that it's a timeshare of is half of the town is a prison, and the other half is where the people live who are servicing the prison, one way or another. And it's 1 month in, 1 month out. So your timeshare is you do a month in prison as a prisoner, and then you come out and do the next month as a civilian in the town. And then the next month you're a prisoner, and vice versa. So you're time sharing both the prison space, which is occupied by somebody else when you aren't there, and your house, which is occupied by somebody else when you aren't there, namely the people who are in prison when you're out. And those are your alternates, and you're never supposed to meet them for obvious reasons. You wouldn't want to have that argument about who didn't clean the bathtub properly, etc.
Or have sparks fly.
You wouldn't want that to happen either, but of course it does.
And so there's this feeling. One of the things I love about the book is there's space, right? It's very much, I feel like, talking about how we as a species are occupying more space, and how do we deal with that as we live with one another. And it's about finding home, but it's also about love. and bumping up against each other in ways that maybe we shouldn't meet. So there's this love story that happens.
Several of them.
Yeah.
But why skimp?
Right. And you have relationship, as always, at the core of any good story, there's relationships. Stan, not the best guy.
Well, who is the best guy? So
in your acknowledgments, you do think your husband.
He's not in the book. That's a good thing.
Yeah. No, but yeah, exactly. Who is the best guy?
So best guys, when you put them in books, they often just kind of slow things down. And I heard that, I learned that a long time ago. In the 18th century, there was a writer called Samuel Richardson, and he wrote 2 huge bestsellers. One was called Pamela. Pamela was a serving wench, and her employer, Mr. B, was trying to get hold of her in a sexual manner. And he tried everything, including dressing up in her nightgown and hiding in her closet and then leaping out. But nothing.
Didn't work?
No, it did not work. She said no. She ran away from it. And finally he proposed to her and they got married. This doesn't usually happen in real life, but it did in Pamela. And in the second book, Clarissa Harlowe, there was also an English gentleman who behaved quite badly, and that didn't turn out well at all. So after he'd written those 2 books, both featuring these cads of English gentlemen behaving badly, the English gentleman came to him and said, we're good guys. Only a few of us are like these other people, and we want you to write a book about us being good. Yeah. So he said, okay. I don't know why he said that. And he wrote Sir Charles Grandison, which is 600 pages long. It starts out promisingly with the maiden in a stagecoach almost being ambushed by robbers and kidnapped, and what other horrible thing we hardly dare imagine. But luckily, Sir Charles Grandison, unluckily or luckily, depending what you think of excitement in novels, Sir Charles Grandison comes along and rescues her and takes her off to his country house where he has some sisters who are chaperones. And the rest of the 600 pages is one example after another of Sir Charles Grandison being a good guy. And you keep thinking, there must be something in the cellar. Is he is he forging money? Is he secretly, head of a band of, miscreants?
Maybe he was the robbers. That would be fun.
No, he was not. No, you keep... That's the suspense that keeps you reading. Maybe he's going to do something bad, but he never does. Now, what is it that leads you to believe that I am the only person you have ever met and ever will meet who has finished this book? So that's the unfortunate story of good guys in books.
Is that when you promised that you would never write an uninteresting character?
I think that's when I saw the folly of having a character that is all good be the central person in a book. So then we have Mr. Darcy, and then a mixed character. And then we have Heathcliff, who is pretty evil when you come to think of it. He hangs a dog. I mean, that's bad. Among the other bad things he does, but that was a low point.
So do you...
You almost lost me right there.
But you finished it.
Oh, well, I finish everything.
Okay.
By lost me, I mean I almost lost sympathy for him, badly though he had been treated in youth.
Did you have, I like that there's always a little bad childhood. That's always with the bad boys.
Not for Sir Charles Grandison, there was...
So do you sympathize with Stan?
Of course I sympathize with Stan. Poor bugger. Yes, he really gets put through the ringer. In fact, I was almost ashamed of myself. I treated him so badly. Especially at the point where he has to dress up as an Elvis Presley sex robot in a costume that's a little too tight. Did I have to do that?
Do you know how happy I am that you brought up the sex robots? I literally have a note on my phone that was like, somehow Get to the prostabots. And it just had a bunch of question marks.
Yes. How dare I bring up the subject, you said to yourself, even though it's right there in the book.
No, I'm so excited that you did. Can you talk, like, where did the idea for it come from? What made you go for it?
You know, the internet is a wonderful place. You find all kinds of things on there, and just the other day I found the most astonishing thing, which is called Pepper, the empathetic robot, which they have just launched in Taiwan and Japan. And Pepper is a greeter, so he stands at, he or she or it, because it looks like a chess piece. It looks like the pawn in a chess set, but with a little smile, and on a stand. And it has hands; it can shake your hand, but it doesn't have apertures. So Pepper is a greeter, and it apparently can read the expression of your face. I don't know whether this is a good thing, but it can, we're told. And they put some peppers on sale for private consumption, and they were snapped up immediately. And the instructions on the Pepper robot say, you are forbidden to use this for sexual purposes. If you see this thing, you would wonder how anybody could ever get it into their head to do that, or how they would, because it's just, it's not suitable for that at all. But there are so many things on the internet that are not suitable. And the middle epigraph of the novel, right at the beginning, there's 3 of them. One is the story of Pygmalion and Galatea. He makes a beautiful statue out of ivory, a lovely girl. He falls in love with her. He goes to bed with her, says they're right in Ovid. And then the goddess of love takes pity upon him and transforms her, just like the blue fairy in Pinocchio. Bing, she becomes a real girl. So that has a happy ending. The 3rd one is from Midsummer Night's Dream, a so-called romantic comedy, though rather a dark one, I have to say. It's dark. But the middle one is called I Had Sex with Furniture, and I found that on the internet. And it is a sofa, apparently, that you could have sex with. And the guy writing the blog post said, I did this so you don't have to. Because it was not a satisfactory experience, according to him. But what I would like to know is what put it into somebody's head to make a sofa like that, and who did they think was going to buy it? Would you have that in your living room?
No, I definitely would not.
You would not?
Absolutely not.
No.
And I actually, what's the best that could happen? Somebody would come along, touch it, bing, and then it becomes a real sofa, and that's just a sofa. Doesn't sound very...
I think that is the best you can hope for. But why not just get a sofa,
Wait, so
Anyway.
I have to realize I'm like totally off my game now. I'm so excited to be talking about this.
You're embarrassed about this sofa.
Yeah, it's because it's just a normal sofa. I really wanted one of those special ones.
No, you don't want that. You don't want that. No, you really don't.
You're absolutely
According
right.
to the tester, his word we have to take, the Consumer Reports guy, writing on the internet says, you don't want this.
I don't know where to go. I kind of want to go to speaking of testing, we were just talking that you're at Staten Island.
Yes.
And this is something that obviously is tied so closely to all of your work, but you always have an eye on the future and on new gadgets, whether they be prostitute robots
Or?
Couches that you can enjoy yourselves with.
Apparently not.
Or have a bad time with. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Really bad.
I don't want to spread that rumor.
It was a bad date with a sofa.
And recently you got to be a bird.
Okay, so I went to something called Future of Storytelling, and it really explores all sorts of different platforms for presenting stories, telling stories, narrative activities of all kind. So there were many, many different sorts of things there. And one of the things, there was a lot of virtual reality. This thing you stick on your head. It's if you think back to the 19th century, it's like those stereoscopic pictures that you looked through and they looked 3D. But real virtual reality is 360 degrees all the way around. And there was a thing called Birdly, and Birdly gave you the experience of flying like a bird, although you were not allowed to poop on anybody's head. No, I know.
That's the best part of the game, if they put it...
Apparently not. So you get onto this thing and stick your hands in the pretend wings.
Are you standing?
No, you're
Okay.
in a slant. Okay, so you're yeah, right, Supermen, like that.
Okay.
And you put the headset on and the earphones, and they put they have a fan in the front of it, which they turn on to make it feel as if the wind is blowing past you. And there you are, soaring over Manhattan. And you can steer by raising the ends of your wings, as you would do.
Is it gloves? Is it...
No, it's you stick your hand through a little sort of strap thing, and the ends are, you can swivel them, and you're supposed to be able to go up by lifting them up and down by down, and then you can veer by lifting one and not the other. I crashed into a skyscraper. You can hit the reset button if you do that, unlike real life. Anyway, I felt quite ill in about 1 minute, and so that was enough of that for me. But other people liked it.
So basically, you to Birdly is that guy to that couch.
Not quite the same kind of spirit.
But a bad time.
Not the best time. Yeah, you do get the sensation of flying like a bird, except you're not nearly as good at it as birds are. Not as good.
And that makes a lot of sense.
It makes, anyway, that was only one of my many experiences at this Future of Storytelling Summit.
Do you have another one you wanted to share?
Let's see now. There were so many.
It sounds like the bird. Well, listen, I did want to. We're talking about nature, and we're talking
Yes.
about birds obviously flying maybe better than humans, strapped to electric masks with straps. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. You guys, come on. This is common in many of your books, and this is in this book absolutely. There's a lot of as society crumbles, men become worse.
Well, actually, everybody becomes worse.
Okay, and there's a lot of sexual violence.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I wouldn't call it sexual violence.
Yeah.
No, not in the
Okay.
normal. Oh, you mean out there?
Yeah.
Oh, beyond the walls. Yes.
Yes.
Beyond the walls, when anarchy happens. Yeah, that is a feature of anarchy. Yes.
And I was just wondering.
One of the boxes you check for, is it anarchy? Yeah.
I think that kind of answers my question.
Yeah.
As society crumbles, that is definitely one of the things that
As
you think.
anarchy gets going, bad things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for sure.
Do you have
Bad thing, check.
check? Very bad thing, check.
Check. Yes.
Got it.
Definitely. That's why I don't want it.
Out of your many dystopian futures, do you have? I definitely don't want to say favorite, but one where you maybe were like, I could kind of see myself setting up shop there. Thank you guys for laughing.
Well, I'd be quite good at the mushrooms. Mushroom foraging.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do that? Stick with me.
All right.
Yes, I'll keep you from getting poisoned.
Is this do you do this in real life?
I do it in real life.
Talk to me about it.
Well, in New York, not a lot of mushrooms here.
No.
No. Not growing wild.
Yeah, not growing wild. Maybe ones you could buy somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes.
Do you go foraging?
I think that kids like this, and actually people like reading books like that because they're thinking to themselves, how would I do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would I be able to make it through this particular thing? This seems to have become a feature of the early 21st century. It wasn't a feature of the 1990s. People were not doing a lot of dystopian literature or video games or anything like that at that point, but they have been in the last 10 years. So part of that is, I think, an uneasy feeling that things are not as stable as they might be, and that we can't predict what sudden event, such as tonight's rainstorm, may suddenly happen. And people are therefore thinking to themselves, would I make it through? I think in this city that 9/11 had quite a lot to do with that feeling of instability, the ground under your feet moving in a different way, and how do you make it through? And I think Hurricane Sandy was another one of those episodes. So that's why I think people are writing them and reading them, and which one you can make it through is going to depend partly on what kind of it is and how well prepared you are for that particular it, whereas you might not be well prepared for a different kind of it. There was a moment, and I bet some of you grew up in it, there was a moment in the 50s when we all thought we were going to be nuclear bombed. And there was an English comedy act called Beyond the Fringe, and they did a skit which was, well, in the case of a nuclear explosion, you just you pull on this large paper bag that we have supplied you with, and you pull it up over your body, and then you just hop along. You hop along to the nearest government agency, and they will tell you what to do. So who was told to duck and cover? Remember duck and cover? It would have had absolutely no effect. It was completely...
What?
Sorry.
Oh.
No effect.
No, but
So
you yourself, again, like you said, 90s, not so much.
No.
Time of prosperous. But you yourself have been writing about these futures and the
For a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
so what do you think it is that draws you to that?
remember when I was born? Of course you don't. No. Either you do and you're too much of a gent to say, or you just really don't. So it was 1939, and what happened in that year? What happened in that year? What war?
A wonderful author was born.
No.
Yes. Yeah, come on.
Well, that's very sweet, but World War II began.
That too.
So being Canadian, which is when we went into that war, that's why I'm short. Yeah, no vitamins. It was.
Is that? Yeah.
No, I'm lying.
Scott.
Yeah. So dictatorships have always been very interesting to me. So we had Hitler, we had Stalin, and we had Mao, and we had some ones that we don't remember quite so well, like Pol Pot, who was pretty bad, and Ceausescu in Romania, whole bunch of different ones. So we have had real dystopias in the 20th century. And you ask me why I'm interested in them, that's why. I've known quite a few people who went through them and got out of them.
Do you see any, I mean, we talked about the financial crisis, obviously, in 2008, some of the motivation for this book, but do you see some of the tightening that's happening here in the United States as red flags walking in that direction?
You know, power is so seductive. And when you give people unlimited power with no oversight, some of them are going to abuse it. So that's what I worry about. I worry about unlimited power with no oversight. And the people who have it will always tell you there's really good reasons for them to have that power, and there's also other good reasons for them to have no oversight. But I'm always just really suspicious of it, because human beings are human beings, and sometimes, you know, when all the cookies are laid out on the table and you're told don't touch the cookies, and somebody goes out and closes the door, there you go.
And also, what about the effects on the environment when it comes to I mean, I feel like we are talking more about corporations right now than we are actually about politicians.
So we're going back into the world of MaddAddam, which is the Oryx and Crake Year of the Flood MaddAddam trilogy.
Yes.
Definitely corporations out of control, but it's the same thing with them. That if there are no checks and balances on them, of course they will do what people do under those circumstances. If there's no checks and balances on them or on any of their competitors, they're all going to go for the cheapest, easiest way to make a buck. And that is, I think, what happened in the Gulf oil disaster. You know, they were taking shortcuts. They were not following the proper procedures. And what did we just see with Volkswagen? Big hunk of cheating going on. And it turns out that they were not the only ones. But if there's nobody saying, look, we know what you're doing, you can't do that, they'll do it because it cuts corners and it makes a profit. And look what it's now cost them. You know, that there's a payback time for a lot of these things.
Which I feel like is actually that gives me hope. I'm an optimist. I'm almost always an optimist. So that it does. Obviously, it was going on for so long, but there's a part of me that says I'm just happy that there's this payback that's happening.
Yeah, and who found it out? It was a small independent testing company. Mm-hmm. So a lot of governments were going, I'm not looking. Mm-hmm. You know, Volkswagen is so big, they have so much money, they're so good for, quotes, our economy. We're just not going to look properly.
Bringing it back to the smaller, more unique human relationships that you have with your two characters in this book, are there different ways in which you see people try to get away with things when they're not held accountable?
Oh, they'll try to get away with things, of course. Mm-hmm. We're people.
Sometimes we're good, right?
Oh yeah. Did I say not?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay.
I mean, the reason human beings are so interesting is that there's always a push-pull between what we know we ought to do and those other things that we would really like to do but know we shouldn't. So,
can you talk a little bit about that in the book?
You know, it's so... Oh, you mean who does the bad thing? Who does bad things? Here's the list. Bad things.
Everybody.
I can't think of anybody who doesn't do a bad thing.
Right.
At least one.
Mm-hmm. But there's also love. There's...
Absolutely.
Traction. Okay.
Of course.
Things are going to be okay is all I want you to tell me right now.
Calm. We'll be all right.
Oh,
Yes.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
You want to touch on the forehead?
Go ahead. Oh, thank you very much. That was beautiful. So this was also kind
You
of...
haven't got to the end yet.
Oh.
Have you got to the end?
I know how the book ends, but we can't tell them. Yeah.
Yes.
But there's also, it's a rewriting of this series. I would love for you to talk kind of about the whole series and what brought you to this book.
Oh, you mean the fact that I started writing this as a serial in installments on Byliner?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I started writing this as a series in installments on Byliner.
Can you explain what Byliner is?
Byliner was, because it is no more, it was an online site that devoted itself to filling the gap left when glossy magazines stopped publishing longer short fiction and longer journalism. So that's what it was doing. It was collating and commissioning and publishing those kinds of things. Amy Tan did the first fiction piece, and because I had an editor who was a friend of mine from the magazine world who had gone with Byliner, she said, why don't you try one? So we did the first one, and that went well, so we did 3 more. And around that time, my publisher started to get agitated. Said, what are you doing, Margaret, you naughty girl? This should be a book with covers and pages. So then I started turning it into a book with covers and pages, but that involved some unknitting of parts of it, some repositioning of other parts, and some finishing of other parts.
And it's something that you put together in this beautiful way. Did you find joy in publishing it online? Different experiences?
I found it very involving and interesting, and it increased my admiration of Charles Dickens, who indeed used to publish that way, but much more rapidly than I. That is, he would write the pages and immediately hand them to the printer's devil who would take them off and typeset them. So he didn't have a nice copy editor the way I would correct things and tell him maybe he might reconsider this particular sentence. He was just putting it out there. And it was like daytime soaps in that he was responding to audience reaction to his characters. His Mr. Pickwick's Papers, there was a character called Sam Weller who was the first Cockney character. And the readership just loved Sam Weller. So his part gets bigger and bigger. And he gets to say more and more things. And one other character, the audience felt that he was being too mean to that person. So he changed her character and made her secretly nice. So and it's not that she had a transformational experience. He just wrote her nicer as the thing went on. And the thing that he didn't respond to was he had a character called Little Nell. It was a very saintly little girl in the old curiosity shop. And she was sickly. She was heading in a pale and angelic way towards the big D. And he got bombarded with letters saying, "Don't kill Little Nell, please don't kill her, you can't do this, no, she must not die." But he did it anyway. And the numbers containing her death, which we'd been alerted to on this side of the ocean by telegram, so they knew the deed had been done. The ship carrying those numbers was met at the New York harbor by a crowd of mourners all dressed in black and weeping into their handkerchiefs. Now that's literary power.
It's literary. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it is also interesting to hear about. It sounds like very old-timey online commenters just writing letters in. Yes. Don't you dare do this.
Don't do it. Yeah. Don't do it, Charles.
How do you, I'm sure you must receive many correspondence. Do you?
Well, now that we have the Internet and Wonders thing, the people who used to write to you with big block letters underlined in red, green, and blue now just yell at you on Twitter.
And you can mute them.
You can block them. But you could always just throw out the letter. But of course, we've all gotten those kinds of letters during our lifetime, and they generally are in block lettering with underlinings or the equivalent of that online.
I feel like I have had, first off, such a wonderful time speaking with you, but I don't want to hog all the time. And I know that we have a lot of students and other wonderful community members here, so I would love to open it up for some communication, not via letter nor online comments, but right here in real life. So I think do we have folks that are going to run microphones? Yeah. So if folks have any questions, I would love to start with that gentleman right there. And they're going to come with a microphone. But real quick first, let's give it up for Margaret Atwood.
You talked a little bit about the dark side of human nature and bringing that forth, and as a writer and tapping into the unconscious and kind of letting that tap flow. I don't know, as a kind of aspiring writer, sort of, that's, I think, one of the things that is really scary about writing fiction is tapping into the unconscious and letting that, exploring that dark side. And I think the books I've read by you, ultimately, it's they're bleak worlds, but it's ultimately uplifting in a certain way at the end. But I guess my question is, how do you deal with that kind of can be a little engulfing, exploring the dark side? So I don't know, any advice you have about negotiating?
You're worried about you doing it. So what might come out? go for it. And if you're worried about other people reading it, use a pseudonym. Many have. So the other thing about writing is when you're doing it in the privacy of your own room, nobody else can see it. So you get a second chance. You get to write it and then you get to read it and decide whether that's what you want to put out there. And if you do want to put it out there, but you're worried about your aunt, what your aunt might think of you, you can use a pseudonym. Especially now that we have various kinds of online publishing, you really can. I have a number of Twitter followers who are cats, just for example.
I thought you were about to say you have a number of anonymous Twitter accounts,
No.
and I was very excited.
No, not yet. And some of my Twitter followers are pairs of shoes. So this too can be yours, if you would like. There is a place where you can try things out, and it's Wattpad, which is a story sharing site, and you can get feedback from other people reading it there. And some of that stuff is pretty dark. So the thing about books is they have covers, and if you don't like what you're reading, you can close the covers. And if you don't like what you're writing, you can stop. But why not explore anyway, just you and the page, to see what happens? Because nobody's looking at you while you're doing it. You don't need to have performance anxiety at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever find that it maybe also helps to explore some of those areas and then let it out on the page?
You mean, does it keep me from murdering people?
I mean, I was trying to be a little more polite. But yeah.
I don't think that, for me anyway, writing isn't psychotherapy for me. It is for some people, and it can be very useful that way. And various kinds of art can be extremely useful for that. It isn't my own personal relationship with it, but because I don't feel that I'm expressing quotes myself. I feel that I'm expressing the work. So what you're really doing is not expressing your own feelings, you're evoking feelings from the reader. So that is a somewhat different thing, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely.
You can, if there's I think I once said, if there's no blood in the cookie, it's not going to work. So obviously there's going to be some of your blood in the cookie, but it's not the whole cookie.
No blood cookies. Also, we've talked about cookies a lot, and
the whole cookie is made of blood. That's not going to work either.
Right.
So if you really want to just express yourself, go out into the backyard and scream. And if you want to make art, that's a different thing. That has some strictures upon it. Then you have a relationship with whoever is going to be receiving that art. You have a responsibility, both to what you're making and to that, to the ultimate recipient, although you don't know who they are. But you want to do well by them. You don't want to be a false Virgil. And my metaphor is from Dante. When Dante finds himself wandering in the dark wood, he meets a guide, and the guide is Virgil. And what Virgil says is, I'm going to take you to hell, but I'll get you out. And that's who you are.
My response is just like, amen. Other questions? Here we go. Now we're cooking with some gas. What about that young woman right there in the back? And by back, I meant front.
Hello, ma'am. It's such a great opportunity to meet you right here. I'm a literature student from undergrad, and I've read quite a few poems by you, so it's so great to finally be speaking with you. I read a few poems like Reincarnation of Captain Cook and Spelling, etc., etc. And you were just talking about how art is not psychotherapy for you, and there's a responsibility that you come with, etc. I want to ask you that when you write poems like as influential and powerful as that, trying to establish a Canadian entity and a feminist entity, how fulfilling do you find it in terms of your own career? I mean, how rewarding has your experience been? I'd love to know. Thank you.
So how important has my experience been in what I write?
How do you feel? I mean, the sense of accomplishment and...
Oh.
I mean, I'm sure it feels amazing to have made a mark. And I mean, I'm inspired by your book. I mean, books and poems and everything. So, what sense does that bring to you?
The good thing for me is actually doing it, and the rest is secondary. So, sense of accomplishment, et cetera, et cetera. You actually aren't allowed to have that if you're still, number one, if you're Canadian. You're allowed to have that if you're American. Canadians aren't allowed to have a sense of accomplishment because they might get too swelled-headed. we don't go for that. But when you're still in process, that is, when you're still very involved in your life as a writer, the most important thing is not any of that. It's the next page.
Right.
That's the most important thing. So the other things are secondary. When I'm really old and sitting in a rocking chair, maybe I'll go in for some of that sense of accomplishment. But
no, as a writer, I mean, it's a fulfilling process, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, sure, but what you want to be doing is making it new. That's a quote.
Yeah, that's very good.
I've had a number of editors over the years, and it's always a dialogue. No, I am not above editorial comment, and yes, I work very closely with my copy editor. His name is Heather Sangster. She has a company called Strong Finnish. Don't you think that's good?
It's a good name.
Copy editor company. And when we edit, we sit down with a paper manuscript. We each have one. I have marked up mine. She has marked up hers. We also have a digital version online in case we have to check something, like search it. So it's very good for searching. And we go through that thing line by line. The biggest arguments are over punctuation. So it's so often true. I have a thing for semicolons. She does not share that thing. I have a thing for vernacular speech, which we sometimes have to argue over. And she's actually really good, and I enjoy working with her. She's just very wonderful person to work with. Here's a comment from hers that I treasure. So in Oryx and Crake, there's a character called Jimmy Snowman, and he eats things called jolt bars. And they're like chocolate bars, only more. So, and he sets out on a journey, and she says, okay, so you've given Jimmy 5 jolt bars, and he eats one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. So you either have to give him one more or have him eat one fewer. Now, that's a good editor. She counted the jolt bars, and then she counted the eating events. They didn't match. She caught it. She saved me from a life of eternal humiliation. And that is what a good editor does. They save you from yourself.
Can we talk a little bit about jolt bars and just your love of making up these incredible either items or tools or foods, and then just kind of not explaining them?
Well, people get what they are, so as we do in real life. I mean, I spend a lot of time, and I always have, looking at product names and advertisements, which are ever new. and ever more weird. And what drives it is trademarking and copywriting. Because as the banal things get used up, like Acme paper products, I once wanted to call, I incorporated in 1976 for bizarre reasons, but I had to think up a name for my corporation. And I tried what might occur to you, like Acme paper products, and they were all taken. So that is why my corporation is called O.W. Toad Limited.
I love it.
Nobody else had called theirs that. It is an anagram of my last name. And if I'd known I was going to be so screamingly famous, I never would have done that.
Can I ask, do you have any favorite modern products right now whose like names you're like, oh man, I wish I had thought of that?
Well, there are really actually a lot of them, but I would have to sit down with the internet, a wonderful thing, and find the ones that I've bookmarked. But when I invent one, I do have to look to see if it really exists, and quite often it does. So the reason things are spelt in such funny ways in the MaddAddam trilogy is that the real versions of those already existed. I made up an assisted suicide virtual reality show in which people got to stage their own suicides, with choruses, music, and set design and everything.
Going out with a bang.
Yeah, with other people watching. And it's called Nighty Night. So I looked up Nighty Night, and it was a children's sleepwear company. Okay, we can't have this. So I changed the spelling. It's like that, and it's like that in the real world. These names are driven by the fact that the first thing that occurred to you, somebody's already got it. There's a real Scales and Tails, but it's a pet store.
So in a lot of your literature, you make social commentary, as you said prior to that. And in the things that I see you writing, I often can kind of find like a current modern day analog. And I was just wondering how you felt about like events that you have lived through prior and events that you have written about kind of happening in real time.
Yeah, sometimes they do come a little bit eerily true. And anytime there is, particularly people seem to be quite riveted on the pigs that are growing human organs. So I'm getting quite a few Twitter notices about those right now. Lab meat, I got quite a few of those. So anything that corresponds to something in my books, people will tell me about it. And then they say things like, Margaret Atwood was right. But I'm not a prophet. And I don't actually have a crystal ball into the future, but I do read Scientific American and New Scientist and what I call pop science magazines, and by that I mean they've got great pictures, and they tell you what's going on, and you don't have to do the math yourself. I should explain that I did grow up amongst scientists and was expected to be one. I disappointed everyone by becoming a writer. And my dad, even when he was quite old, he would say, "You would have made such a wonderful botanist." And I know, because these are my relatives, I know that if I get one of those things wrong, I'm going to hear about it. So I do try to be accurate about things like that, and therefore I follow the research along, and when I base something in a book on that, it's because I know people are already working on it. So then when it comes true, it's no big surprise to me, but it is to a lot of other people, because they think I've somehow divined it, which I haven't.
So you have a lot of research in your fiction.
Well, it's the Alice in Wonderland method. So verdict first, trial afterwards. I write the scene, and then I do the research to see if I can stand behind it. It's more like that. But of course, you're always drawing on a lot of junk that's accumulated in your head from years of reading things. And I do go back and check to see if I'm remembering it accurately. For instance, I thought I remembered the song that the brownies sang when they danced around the magic toadstool. And I did remember it mostly, but I had a few words wrong. So you just want to make sure you get that right, because you are going to hear about it from people who will write you the letters in the big block lettering. You idiot.
Which is now Twitter in all caps.
Yeah, you idiot. That is not the way it was, etc. She wonders what my schedule for writing is like. She thinks I have a schedule for writing. Yeah, I would love to have a schedule for writing. That's an aspirational goal of mine, to have a schedule for writing, but I've never managed it. I have an idea of one. I know what it would look like if I had one, but I've never actually managed to do it. So I try to. Instead of having a schedule, I have a set number of pages that I try to write every day, and I've never managed to do that either. So these are things you strive towards. So maybe one of these days I'll do it.
When's your goal for pages?
5. Yeah, 5 is good, but you can cheat by making the typeface bigger. So if I feel rather discouraged, I just make it really big, and I think, look, it's 5 pages.
I think half the kids in this audience do that every day with their teachers.
Well, it is encouraging, and it's very discouraging to do it the other way. Look, it's only 1 page. Shrink. No.
What would your perfect? You'd mentioned that there is a perfect schedule that you've never kept.
Okay,
But
so
give us the dream.
Okay, the dream is in a short story by Henry James, except you'd have to be a man to do this, and you'd have to be living in about 1890. Okay, so this character is living in a little bijou house in the country with a beautiful garden. He has a gardener. He has a very lovely wife and 2 attractive children. He has only 4 servants. You can see that it is a modest establishment.
Yeah, only 4.
Yes. He has a lovely study that he goes into every morning and gets out his, I suppose, silver pen, and does some writing in his elegant handwriting. And about 11 o'clock, one of the servants wafts in with a cup of tea and the day's post. So he looks through the day's post and has his cup of tea. And then he has luncheon about 1 o'clock with some select erudite and amusing guests. Other people did the cooking and also clean up. And then you can see how it goes. He has a cigar at some point during this.
Like around 3.
Well, I think it's with the sherry.
Oh, so 2.
Later.
Oh no, later. Oh, later.
Later in the day, and he does a bit more writing in the afternoon. He savors the writing that he does, and then he has a lovely evening soiree in which people wear evening gowns and they dress up in outfits, guys' outfits, dinner jackets. So that's never going to happen to me. I don't think it's ever going to happen to you, but that was their idea about it. It's not going to happen to you because you don't want it to happen to you.
I think I could look good in a smoking jacket.
You don't want the bother of all of this.
4 servants does sound like a lot.
You don't want to have to pay for all of this.
Definitely couldn't have.
So that was people's idea of what it was in 1890 to be a writer. I saw that movie with Virginia Woolf in it, The Hours. Remember that? So her nose was glued on, you could tell. And I was a little annoyed by that character because what she did a lot was smoke cigarettes, and she was rude to the servants. Now, apparently in real life, that did happen. She was sometimes rude to at least one of her servants. But she was portrayed as kind of a lunatic, very sort of angry, intense person, and that was people's ideas of a woman writer of the, say, 30s, 40s, that you had to be somewhat crazy. It comes from the Emily Dickinson, Christina Rossetti school of being a woman writer. But I don't think you really have to be. You know, I've known quite a few women writers, and only maybe about a quarter of them have been crazy.
Which, for writers, that's a pretty good odds.
That's what I think too, yeah. I shouldn't say the word crazy, it's a bad word. Only...
Difficult.
No, that's condescending.
Damn it.
Challenged. How about that?
I like that.
Something like that.
Mhm.
Hard to get along with, very definitely some of the time. But the rest of the time, and the rest of the people that I've known have really been pretty great. I think it became all right to be a woman writer who had some kind of another life too. I think it became all right to be that in about 1967. Round about then.
Can I ask why such a specific date?
I just picked it out of the air, but that's what seems to be what I recall. Okay, let's say 1969, which is when I met Alice Munro, who's a great old friend of mine. And she is a very agreeable person and is not that kind of tearing the hair out, pacing around the room and smoking a lot of cigarettes type of person.
Did you ever feel the need to want, I think especially in a room with many young writers, there's this want to kind of mimic those that they look up to, and a lot of, sometimes there is that, the crazy writer, the writer.
Well, I used to be asked, and this is true, I used to be asked in the 60s, the era of Sylvia Plath, not whether I was going to put my head in the oven, because I was mostly a poet then, but when. You know, so people really did feel that it was the badge of a serious poet that you should be, if you were female, that you ought to be suicidal, and that if you were male, you ought to be a drunk like Dylan Thomas, and that if you weren't those things, then you weren't somehow really dedicated to your art. So it's the hangover from the really quite destructive romantic agony school of writers that was prevalent in the 19th century. But for women, you were expected to choose between art and life, basically. And if you chose art, you were really going to be some sort of fairly scary person.
So you feel like...
Not like me.
I'm fine. I love that you found this, like, art and life, and that they're one and the same for you. It seems
No, they're not one and the same, but you can have them both.
both. Okay.
How and when did I absolve myself from doubt? Okay, so you never actually do, but you mean, how do you get up the courage to get past that, at least enough to finish something? Well, as I said, nobody's looking at you when you're actually doing it. So just forget that get rid of that person who's looking over your shoulder, because they aren't really there. How about that? If you want lots of tips and you want to be egged on, there's somebody who will do that for you on the internet, a wonderful place. And his name is Chuck Wendig, C-H-U-C-K, Wendig, W-E-N-D-I-G, and he has a blog called Terrible Minds. I have to warn you that he swears a lot, but in an amusing way. And he's pretty smart about everything he says about writing, and he's very encouraging. So he has a lot of little ebooks that you can get, and he also has a blog that is encouraging and talks a lot about getting past doubt. The other thing, if you want to try it out, there's a thing called storyisastateofmind.com, and that is a hands-on coach you through it one. For that one, you pay money. Chuck's blog is free. His ebooks you pay money for. There is a ton of stuff on the internet of this kind, but those are the two I mentioned because A, I know them, and B, I think they're pretty good. And Chuck saves me a lot of time because although he swears a lot and writes genre books, what he says about the process of writing is pretty true for all writers. So try those coaches. They'll get you past that doubt, or else. or else, yeah. Conversely, you could read The Pilgrim's Progress and get past the slough of despond. is the giant doubt, I think, that's the figure. It's all allegories about horrible things that happen in your spiritual life, etc. So the question is, religion, what do we think about religion, Margaret Atwood? So number one, it's useless for somebody like Richard Dawkins to say you shouldn't have religion, because people have it. So the question to be asked is, what kind of religion? And is it being used in a positive way or a negative way? So in that way, it's like everything else that human beings do. It can have a positive effect or a negative effect. And when it's having a negative effect, it's when somebody gets hold of it and tries to use it as a power tool to control other people. And when it's having a positive effect, it's when an individual person has a relationship with it, which is very helpful to them. And I will tell you the following anecdote to illustrate this. Once upon a time, myself and my friend Peter Pearson decided to do a television show about an outfit called the Bernardo Children. And the Bernardo Children, Dr. Bernardo, was a charity in England that collected slum kids, didn't have parents and things, up off the streets of London and sent them to Canada. And they were supposed to be placed with a good family. Ha ha. And the good family was given a certain amount of money to support this placement, and they were supposed to be then brought up in a good Christian home, etc. And before leaving, they were, however, given a Christian education to a certain extent. And then the children were shipped off to the good homes, and some of the homes were good. We put a letter put a thing in the paper that said, if you were one of these children or are descended from one or knew one of them, send us your stories. And we thought we might get maybe 10. We got 600 because there were a lot of these kids that were shipped over. And some of them said, this was the making of me. I never would have come to anything if this hadn't happened to me. My family was great to me, gave me a start in life, etc. Others said, the so-called good family was horribly exploitative. We were treated like slaves. We had to sleep in the barn. They took the money intended for us and spent it on themselves. We were sexually abused. You know, just every awful thing you could imagine. But a theme that came out of it was, although this was all very tough, because of the assurance that we were given before we went, that there was somebody on our side, namely God, etc., we got through it. So that would be an example of personal relationship of a positive kind getting you through tough times. A negative kind would be all of that stuff that you have read in the papers about people abusing their position. So it can be good, it can be bad. It's not going away anytime soon. So the question to be asked about it is it positive? Now, I have been very encouraged by this new Pope and his the stand that he has taken. And that would agree with the position that if you really do want to love your neighbor like yourself, you have to love your neighbor's air, water, and food. And that is part of a growing green element in religion, which has been a long time coming, but it's coming now. The God's Gardeners in the Year of the Flood are based on a real element of that movement, and I now know some real ones. They're called Arocha, A-R-O-C-H-A. This was a movement founded by an Anglican clergymen, and it's bringing back into Christianity something that used to be there, but that left it in the 18th century when people started using a mechanical model for nature. So that the holistic view is coming back. Walk into any medieval cathedral and you will see that it was there, because the whole thing is it's a forest. The sky is above, the stars, etc., are up there, and the story of creation goes around the outside in pictures. And that is the way cathedrals were put together for people who couldn't read. So it was a living nature part of everything construct. How about that?
And how fitting that we are at St. Francis College.
Yeah, St. Francis is a good guy. He gets to be one of the God's gardener saints, along with St. Robert Burns and St. Al Gore. Al will be a saint in the future. What question do I keep coming back to, such as, what day is it? Where am I?
Who are all of them?
Who are they? Why am I doing this? Yeah, I mean, there are questions, existential questions like that. Do you mean in my work? I don't know. I'm not a philosopher, so I'm a writer. And philosophers work with ideas, and writers work with mud. So I'm down there in the mud, and I'm making things out of the mud. And out of the mud, things grow. So that's how I see writing happening. I don't see it happening with ideas up here that I'm wrestling with, and then I turn those into novels. And I know that fiction is often taught that way, because the teachers have the advantage of being able to read the whole book. And I don't have that advantage when I'm writing it, because I'm down there in the mud. I have a book about writers and writing. It's called, oddly enough, On Writers and Writing. It used to be called Negotiating with the Dead, because I'm that kind of person. And it isn't about how to write or my writing. It's about what is writing, and who do writers think they are? You know, what do they think they're doing? And the introduction to it says I started out asking writers why they wrote, and that actually got me nowhere, because I had about 4 pages of answers, and they were everything from to justify the ways of God to man, to show up those kids in high school who thought I couldn't do it and rub their nose in it. And you can't have both of those at once. To get back at my parents, to make a lot of money. One of my favorites was, I like to create a boudoir for the reader, where the reader can go in and have fun. That was from Czechoslovakia. So I collected all of these, and there wasn't actually, it didn't boil down to one thing. So then I asked a different question, and the question was, I asked a bunch of writers, dead and alive, what's it like going into a book? And now we were getting somewhere, because they all used a metaphor a lot like the Inferno, Dark Wood. They all used a metaphor that involved going into a dark place and going through that dark place until something became light. So I'm not wrestling with ideas. I'm going into the dark place until something becomes light.
Amen.